Well, good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you all here today. This session is recorded. If you want to go back and have a look at it, you do have the ability to turn your camera on if you want. No problems. Most people have got them off today. Yeah, that's all up to you guys. I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're all joining from today, wherever that might be. And I do pay my respects to their elders, past and present. And I extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders joining us here on the call. So welcome to this month's webinar. My name's Toby Hedgeland. I'm one of the ag scientists here at AgriProve. Today I'm joined by plenty of people with their cameras on here. I've got Mathew Denton, CEO of LawrieCo, and also Toby's agronomists, Harry Clarke and Rod Capon. So thanks for joining us today, guys. As always, lots of info coming your way. Do put any questions in. I've got a Q&A sort of above me here. I'm not sure where it is on your screen, but put any Q&A. We'll keep an eye on those as we go through. The guys will try and answer those in a timely fashion if we can. We'll come on to them at the end and we'll take a look at them as well. Let's get into it. All right, so today's topic very much focused on cropping, maximise your carbon potential this cropping season. So this, although focusing in on cropping, equally applicable to pasture establishment renovation too. So if you're a grazier joining us today, there's some takeaways for you as well. But in the cropping game, many of us are now watching the horizon for rain, starting to turn our attention to getting our machinery and properties ready to start sowing. As we're getting into that mindset, and hopefully today you'll be able to take away a few other changes in that setup that you could implement this season to achieve some not only good yields, but to sequester some carbon while doing so. All right, we are all in the farming game. We know it's pretty tough at the minute, a lot of stuff on the news, and it's really becoming a pretty challenging game. We're fighting against the rising costs that continue to outpace our incomes and are compressing our margins. We've got seasons that seem to be varying more widely than they used to, and often to an extent that's having severe impacts on our yields, those climatic impacts really threatening us. And we also have the added weight now of consumer expectations and government legislation to make everything greener, more sustainable, and not only that, but cheaper as well. So where do we turn with all of these mounting pressures? Look, starting a soil carbon project is a good way to tackle some of these pressures, and at AgriProve, that's one of our main goals, is to mainstream that farmer-led commercial model of soil carbon farming, turning primary production from a source of carbon into a sink for carbon. And running a soil carbon project is a great way to validate those farm management practices that we do that boost our soil carbon and to help develop land that is more soil resilient around those aforementioned climate changes or weather extremes. Running a soil carbon project with improved soil health can also help your profitability on farm through just your normal operations, but can also help us to diversify our income streams as well, generating income through ACCUs or carbon credits from our sequestration activities as well. You also have the added benefit with soil carbon projects that you can continue your existing cropping or grazing enterprise. We're not talking about taking any land out of existing production. We don't have to plant trees or lock up any land. So we have that added convenience around just starting a soil carbon project, continuing our business as usual. A quick update and a word of welcome. I normally have this slide in our decks as well. The portfolio continuing to grow rapidly in the last couple of months, welcoming quite a number of properties in the Queensland state. So welcome to anyone from Queensland. Also new properties across New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia. So welcome to everyone who's joined the AgriProve family in the last month or two. To our existing project holders, ACCUs being credited at a rate of knots as well, seeing ACCUs being issued out across New South Wales to several 2-year-old and also 1 4-year-old project. So congratulations to those landholders as well. In the bottom row of my little table there too, you can see there's a raft of applications going through the crediting process at the moment. So exciting times for those producers. Current market value, that's in excess of $6 million of ACCUs coming down the line for those guys too. So great to see that coming into our landholders' pockets as well. So if you are considering a soil carbon project, you can see the great dispersion across all of the arable areas of Australia there pretty much. And you can see those orange dots are all accrediting, so lots of crediting as well. So everyone getting amongst it. Hopefully today, with a bit of the information we share with you, I can give you a bit of a clearer way forward on potentially improving your operation and maybe even starting a soil carbon project. To frame up a bit more about today, I've included a really, really slimmed down piece that we've covered in previous webinars. Generating ACCUs or carbon credits, I use those terms interchangeably, is very much about balance. And we might be sequestering a lot of carbon on farm, but if we've been inefficient and create a lot of emissions above what we demonstrated in our baseline period, it's going to count against us at crediting. Inversely, if we've reduced our emissions, this can count for us. So it's just important to keep this balance front of mind as we're doing our planning and keeping everything in check as we move through our planning for any cropping systems. Where do I start on improving my cropping game or getting into this soil carbon business? It all seems very, very confusing. Well, look, as I said earlier, we are enjoying or not enjoying, disenjoying enormous pressures on the ag sector at the moment due to being requirements to be more sustainable. And look, to that end, AgriProve now not only helps you to manage your soil carbon project, but also to take a really holistic view of your farming operations. So the AgriProve platform now enables you to easily assess your emissions. We can help you assess your potential and the cost to establish a soil carbon project. We can also look at your climate and nature-based risks determined by your management activities that you're undertaking on farm, giving you scores around that sort of stuff. And then the fifth box on my slide there, where the rubber really hits the road, is that we can deliver some insights from our insights engine, which digests all of that on-property information and gives you some simple, actionable insights to improve your metrics across the board. So most relevant to our discussion today, it's a bit small in that little frame there, but what the insight that we've got there is you can see the emissions intensity for some oats on my farm here, and they are benchmarked against the ABARE stats nationally for emissions intensity. So you can see how you're performing domestically and also some other international indices. So I can get an idea of my on-farm emissions intensity, how efficient I'm being in terms of my emissions around production of whatever crop it might be that I'm producing. Then in the bottom half of that little frame there, the tiny little frame, we've got 4 other ways that I could either reduce my emissions or perhaps increase my sequestration potential as well. So giving you some actionable insights, as I said. So look, if you're not sure where to start and if you want to dip your toe in the water, this is a really great place to start. Invest 5 minutes, fire up the AgriProve platform. It's free to use. It's really simple. You don't have a soil carbon project, but it'll get you going on an emissions journey, improving your farm productivity and enabling you to consider your options around carbon projects, so on and so forth. All right. If I did decide that a carbon project was suitable for me, I'd need to nominate some new changes that I'd make on my farm around sustainability. We call these eligible activities. They're part of the registration process. I put them here just to sort of outline, none of them are rocket science. They're activities that you do, and we can make some tweaks or some slight changes to these if we were to start a soil carbon project. Most of it's just practical management, and I'm going to hand over to the boys in a minute, and they'll give you some more technical details on some of these activities, and you'll hear how easy it is to make some changes in your cropping system aligned to eligible activities or starting a soil carbon project. All right, step 3, just finishing my intro before I hand over to the guys to tie all this back to the AgriProve process, the RBIMC process we call it. How does it all fit together? Look, if you're planning to make some changes this cropping season, now is the time to register. You can take advantage of those changes as an eligible activity if they fall into the criteria. And if you're an existing project holder, look, you're in the implementation phase, right in the heart of it. You're continuing to manage your farm to maximise that sequestration. Hopefully you can leverage some of the advice from the guys here today that they share. In the middle of that little frame there, I've also highlighted a key passage. I just called this out because it's a question that I get commonly asked from people when I'm out on farm. When you work with AgriProve, you still maintain full autonomy around your on-farm management. It's your farm, it's your choice. You're calling the shots on this sort of stuff. We don't dictate how you manage. That's up to you, but we do encourage you to make sure that everyone in your whole team, especially consultants and agronomists, understand your objectives, so you're working together towards your goals. So whilst you and your team are managing effectively, we'll still be there in the background offering some guidance, like we are today. That is our proposition, offering you guidance. And with that, I'm going to hand over to some experts to give us a bit more knowledge and expertise in the realm that they're experts. So with that, welcome Harry, Rod, and Mathew. Harry, over to you. I'm going to stop sharing and I'll let you share your slides and take it away.
Thank you, Toby. That should be on screen now.
Yep, that has come through.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thanks for the introduction there, Toby. As was indicated, we're just going to do an overview of more of the cropping side of things today and how you might best be positioned for this season that's ahead. So just by way of an introduction, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Harry Clarke and I'm the National Carbon Agronomist here at LawrieCo and busy supporting the team across both SA and Victoria and WA. Just as a background of LawrieCo, we actually began in Port Pirie here in SA, which for those of you who are unaware is a low rainfall, mostly cropping and grazing environment. And Adrian Laurie, he started on this soil carbon journey because he identified that his farms and the family farm's soil carbon was actually going backwards. And that carbon measure actually became an indicator of general soil health, profitability on farm. And Adrian found that if he could improve that carbon over time, which he did start to with the introduction of some biologicals on farm, that was the key driver in increasing those yields, increasing fertilizer use efficiency, and as such. So that was really the starting point for us. And fast track over 25 years, the team here at LawrieCo, we've developed up a soil carbon management system we call a soil carbon regeneration system. And that's specifically designed to be an integrated approach to building up soil carbon on farm, yes, through the use of our biological fertilizers and biostimulants, also through the incorporation of some other tactics and strategies, which Rod will go over today, and all with the design of replenishing the land's natural carbon resource. We've now been able to secure over 250 soil carbon projects in the cropping sphere to date, so really proud of that achievement. And the first of which there's been 2 credited, as you may have seen, which are both in Victoria in Shepparton, 2 credited to date. And we've got another 11 that are just in that process now of going through crediting. And of course, looking forward to many more in this next 12 months coming through for their next round of testing. Also as an understanding of where we're based, our head office is here in SA, which is the bulk of our liquid manufacturing. And we're pleased to have distribution nationally through our reseller network. And we've also just opened up a new site in Bordertown, which we opened not last week, but week before, which is predominantly where our biograze, which is a pasture-based product, is coming out of, largely to service that pasture market down there. So pleased to have another facility open in the southeast now as well. I'm going to get out of the way in the short term, and I'll be back just later on. I'm going to pass to Rodney Capon, who's one of our Victoria managers. Rodney's got over 2 decades of experience working both on farm, commercial mallee farming and viticulture enterprises, and also in agronomy roles. And his real specialty is integration of biology into conventional programs. Rod's now based out of Geelong, and largely servicing, as I said, the Victoria and New South Wales area. So, Rod, I will hand over to you, and I will come back later on. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Harry. Thanks, Toby. Yep, thanks, Harry. So we're just going to run through at a fairly high level, and we'll leave a bit of time at the end of this for more specific questions that anyone has. So today's topic, getting more from your cropping this season, and boosting carbon and cutting emissions. So we want to try and tie in what we've done as a company, which is about soil and plant health, and building resilience to the system, which then also, as a byproduct of doing all that, builds soil carbon. So it fits very well. So we want to run through a couple of sort of different steps through this meeting. So I've got a couple of slides just to show everybody and to highlight what the current system is doing, and why people may look at changing, whether it's to build carbon or to increase resilience to drought, frost, all those sort of problems that people are having. But look at what's happening in the agriculture sector at the moment under conventional agriculture. Then look at some steps we can take to start to push things in the right direction. And fairly small changes that complement and enhance your existing program, that will all fit in with your existing machinery. So no massive changes needed, just a few tweaks here and there. Then Harry's going to run through a bit of knowledge and understanding. So testing and understanding what's happening on your farm, as well as run through some training modules and that have been put together. And he's also going to close out with some actions that can get you started this season easily. Thanks, Harry. So if we're sort of thinking about what it is that current agriculture is doing, and looking at the decline which a lot of people have seen in their soil. This is a study that was done by the Department of Primary Industries, the Walpyup Research Station, across a number of different sites from 1925 to 2005. And they monitored at the time, to the best of their ability, what they perceived as the key soil health parameters. So they were looking at soil carbon, soil structure, soil compaction, trace element availability, soil biology, the split between fungi and bacteria, and water holding capacity. And as you can see in that slide, apart from one of those lines, everything has declined over that period. This correlates with the introduction of bigger tractors and tillage, correlates with the introduction of urea, it correlates with the introduction of agrochemicals. All of which have pushed all of those soil health parameters down. The line that you can see going up is bacterial numbers, and we'll talk more about this as we go through. But this balance between fungi and bacteria plays a critical role in the system, and supports all those other parameters. So as that's all, as those other factors have come down, soil carbon has also dropped dramatically, which is the dark blue line at the top. So we've got a few other slides where we'll delve into that a little bit deeper. Thanks, Harry. So I think there's everybody out there that's involved in agriculture is seeing more weed problems, and perhaps their chosen crops not growing quite as well and efficiently as they would like them to. So this slide covers what's called plant succession order, which has a direct relationship to fungal and bacteria ratios within the soil. Going from bare rock material at 100% bacterial through to old conifer forests and whatnot, up to 1,000 to 1 fungal dominance. Where we'd like to be sitting, down in that sort of bottom right hand corner and through to a little bit higher fungal dominance, 1 to 1, 2 to 1, depending on whether you're growing grasses or legumes and whatnot. But in that sort of range there. And I must add that this is about beneficial fungi, not pathogenic fungi, because there has been a little bit of a change in the balance of those two, or in the fungal distribution as far as pathogens and beneficial as well. But the 1-to-1 would ideally be where we'd like to be, but we're back more to that 10-to-1 and sometimes even greater in bacterial dominance, which is creating the perfect situation for more of these weeds that we're seeing, and a retardation of the crops that we're trying to grow. So just trying to highlight, and we'll get onto the benefits that the fungi have with building carbon, but it's also as much to do with your production system and the way that your plants and your soils are behaving. So again, just to highlight, like the last couple of slides, we're talking about this decline in fungal populations, and trying to get those back in. And as I said, we'll get into the benefits of soil carbon with that as well. But if we look at that left-hand slide, a famous soil scientist by the name of Elaine Ingham carried out this experiment to just sort of show people visually what the benefits of fungi in the soil are above a lot of others. But sterilized potting mix retains 0 calcium when a liquid calcium was poured into the pot and let leach through the bottom. The pot number 2, a bacterial inoculated potting mix, retained 2% of the calcium. Pot number 3, inoculated with fungi, retains 100% of the calcium. So it's just a really another really good example to sort of show the importance of bringing biology and biological balance back into your soils. And it kind of starts to explain some of these problems we're having with mineral leaching and mineral lockup and all of those associated problems. And then I guess everyone's seen the table on the right hand side, mineral availability through the different pH ranges. And we'll talk more about urea applications and alternatives to that as we get through the presentation. But trying to reduce soil acidity and make these minerals more available is paramount to what we're doing here. And so soil carbon is a massive buffer for acidification, and some of the other things that we'll talk about that are paramount in building soil carbon actually mitigate this acidification that we're all having trouble with. So we've put together what we've labeled here as a carbon building checklist. So this is six steps that you can check off as farmers and ensure that you're building or producing a system that has the maximum ability to regenerate itself and build that soil carbon and grow healthy, resilient plants. I must say that LawrieCo is a biological soil and plant nutrition company, and so we focus on those inputs. There are, as you can see on the bottom left of that slide, there are a number of other things that all play a part in building soil carbon: cover crops, crop rotations, animal management, equipment selection, tillage, non-tillage, rainfall bands, farm processes, timing, and there's a myriad more things that play into that. But we're just going to focus on the mineral and or the soil plant nutrition, as well as biological function within the soil and the plants today. If we go around that table in front of you there, I'm starting at the top there with mineral balance, which I think most people would agree is fairly paramount to kick-starting the system. So here we're talking about having enough of the minerals in the system to support the plants and the biology. We're also talking about the base cations in forming or helping to form that base soil structure. So if we don't have air in the soil, if we don't have gas exchange, if we don't have water infiltration, if we have water logging, any of those parameters are going to be a disturbance to the next one, which is microbial balance. But we need to sort of work on that to begin with. So that's where lime and gypsum and things come into play. Mineral balance also plays a role in that soil pH. So mineral balance is absolutely critical, which then leads on to microbial balance. As we sort of looked at in those earlier slides, we had fungal and bacteria ratios out of whack, but there's so many more species of biology living in the soil, quite often overlooked, but protozoa, earthworms, nematodes, all those types of things, it's all critical for making a healthy soil and for inevitably building soil carbon. Carbon balance, so we can look at that in a few different ways. We saw in that first slide or the second slide from the Walpiup Research Station that soil carbon has dramatically declined over the years. I guess when we look at soil carbon, if we're under a carbon project, we're measuring all of the fractions, but the real powerhouse and the driving force of soil and soil carbon is that humus fraction. So that's what's naturally giving buffering ability and mineral holding and water holding capacities and tying up toxins and really the powerhouse for driving the soil. So where we've lost that, we'll get into it. There's a few examples coming, but there are some products that are manufactured from natural resources and refined that can be added to synthetic and conventional systems to alleviate the problems that we have without having that naturally in the system so much anymore. So we'll get onto that. Biological inoculants and stimulants, when we're starting from a very low base or where we're using fungicides throughout the season, often it's necessary to come back in, whether it's at seeding time, whether it's post-harvest, whether it's in crop, whatever. There's, and we'll get into some more detail on that as well. But it can be imperative to come back in and lay down some of those integral species of biology to get that system going again after there has been, whether it's fungicides, whether it's mechanical tillage of the soil, whether it's because the soil's been sterilized over summer because there's been no residue on the surface. You know, there's a number of factors that play into that. Biological nutrition management. So this is about doing things in a few parts. One that doesn't disturb the natural biology and the soil system as much. So that might be about buffering. It might be about enhancing the efficiency of products so you don't use as much of it. It might be about completely swapping things out and using different products to do the same job. So there's a number of facets to that, and we'll look at some of that as we get on. And biological residue management. So I think we're all aware of the detrimental consequences of burning crop residue and removing all of that cover, the hot summer suns and whatnot. And so, but there's a delicate balance in leaving residue there, in that nitrogen drawdown becomes a bigger problem, and that seeding equipment can struggle to get through that residue. So we have a bit of an answer for that as well coming. So we'll get to all that. So thanks, Harry. So there's a couple of basic principles to think about as you're doing any process on the farm. And this is kind of the four up here. So inoculate, stimulate, enhance, and buffer. So as we sort of spoke about in that last slide, bringing some of that beneficial biology back into the system can play a big part. I think everyone that's out there that's ever grown a pulse crop would understand that inoculating with rhizobium has massive financial returns compared to the cost of it. Pretty much no one sows a legume these days without doing it. So that applies to a lot of other strains of biology in the system, and that could be an easy, cheap start. Stimulating. So there's so many things we do in the system to the detriment of the biology, and also, I guess, the products we're applying, whether it's applying things with the wrong pH range or whatnot, but quite often we're suppressing everything. So this is about trying to put some stimulants back into that system to get the growth of the biology and the biological numbers, and not just one species or whatnot. So quite broad spectrum stimulants. So looking at multiple products. We're starting to talk about your fishes and your kelps and your humic acids and all those types of things that all have sort of broad spectrum biological stimulation, but also some that are, you know, more specific to one or the other, depending on what you're trying to do. And then look at enhancing what you do. So when we're talking about phosphorus fertilizers and chemicals and nitrogen and everything else, there's a lot of losses in the system always. So whether we're getting phosphorus lockup or whether we're getting volatilization of nitrogen, or whether chemicals are not penetrating in through the leaf. So we have products and the ability to be able to complement those synthetic and chemical applications to increase their efficiency, and to make them more efficient. So ideally we can use less to do the same job. So as Toby was sort of saying earlier, your emissions of your inputs becomes a big thing. So if we can enhance and make what we're doing more efficient, then we can reduce those rates, and we can reduce the inputs. So we'll talk more about that as we go through. And then buffering. So like a lot of those previous slides, we spoke about the toxic effects of, you know, particularly fungicides, but insecticides, herbicides, acidic fertilizers. They all have this toxic effect to disrupt the soil biology. So where we can buffer those, so where we can use something to put with those to reduce that toxic effect and absorb it. And I guess, you know, a perfect analogy of this would be it's your carbon filters in your tractor or the carbon filter in your spray mask. It has that ability to hold on to and bind up some of those toxins. So very similar way to that humus component in the soil naturally, and the same as what humic and fulvic acids will do, which are extracted from that humus component. Thanks, Harry. So just to put it all in perspective, so this is a gentleman from up near Shepparton, Luke Felmingham. He, as you can see down the bottom there, in a 12-month period, he generated 12.7 tonnes a hectare of soil carbon, or he sequestered 12.7 tonnes of soil carbon. And so Luke's been a little bit of a case study, as a lot of these other guys that have built carbon, where we've gone back and we've looked at, okay, so what did they do, and you know, what did they do differently to the other guy or whatever else to actually do this. And it's pretty clear to us, if we looked back to the 6-step ring that we saw a few slides back, the more of those processes that you can implement and tick off, the more rapid the carbon build is, and you know, which is partially because of the less oxidization of carbon back out of your system. So Luke was fortunate. Before starting a carbon program, he'd spent a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort in getting his mineral balance of his soil. It's pretty fantastic. I look at a lot of soil tests, and his sort of base cations, calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, hydrogen, are pretty much spot on. He's invested a lot into phosphorus and sulfur and whatnot, and he's got all those minerals there as a really good base. So he was struggling with biology, and we've still got work to do there. But basically, Luke implemented all of what we were talking about earlier. So he applied a seed treatment to all his seed at the beginning of the season to give that plant not only the minerals that it needs to get started for a strong productive start, but also biostimulants and biology around there to give it all it needs. All of his base fertilizer was buffered with humate prills or humic acid, so Biomax humate prills. All of his ag chem that he applied, apart from residual herbicides or pre-emergent herbicides, sorry, was buffered with fulvic acid, Biomax F75. He digested all of his residues with stubble digester, and then carried out a number of foliar spray programs, which we'll get into down the track, but the benefits of that. So and then he still did do some broadcast urea, but that was all buffered and enhanced with Biomax enhanced liquid fertilizer coating. So fairly easy for Luke to do, not having to change any machinery. I'm still using his conventional machinery. You know, a little bit of time standing there while he's filling a truck with seed, pouring some stuff into the hopper to put on the seed and whatnot, but pretty straightforward, not a huge expense, and massive results. So if we look back at what Luke did, and I said, look, one of the first steps that he took, and it's very easy for anybody that's listening to implement this, but so we make a range of seed treatments. So they're under a SureCrop brand. So we have SureCrop Prime and SureCrop VAM are the two main ones. And I guess the main difference between that is you're looking at some plants are hosts of mycorrhizal fungi, and others are not. So pretty much most of the things that people are growing in the audience here, I would assume that canola and lupins would be the two main plants or crops that people are growing that aren't hosts of mycorrhizal fungi. Pretty much most other things are that you're probably growing out there. So if you look at what an ideal seed treatment is made up of, it's made up of the minerals that the plant needs to get going. So and in the right form. So phosphorus, but non-soluble phosphorus, so that you get mycorrhizal colonization still, your calcium, your sulfur, all of those macronutrients other than nitrogen, your full spectrum of trace elements as well. So you're sort of wrapping that seed in everything that plant needs for a healthy establishment. And then biostimulants and biological inoculants also come into their own when you're talking about a seed treatment. So you're putting biostimulants on to stimulate the natural biota, the soil biota, as well as then putting in some inoculants of more specific soil biology that have the benefits of mycorrhizal fungi being sort of the number one thing that we often talk about, and that is often of low numbers in the soil system. So I guess if we just sort of focus on mycorrhizal fungi, for those people that don't know, it has a symbiotic relationship with the plant where it actually attaches to the root of the plant. And it then goes and scavenges water and minerals and feeds it back to the plant in return for carbohydrates. As a result of that, it exudes organic substances, one of those being glomalin, which is known as the soil superglue, which actually binds particles together and forms microaggregates which lock in carbon with inside those and help to protect that from oxidization and give you some long-lived carbon in the soil. So these, when we're talking about carbon building and we're talking about soil aggregation and whatnot, some of these species of biology play an absolutely critical role in that. Trichoderma, like a lot of people will be aware, has the ability to outcompete a lot of pathogenic fungi. So all of a sudden, if you can get that sort of side of the system happening, you become less reliant on fungicides. So therefore less antagonism into the system, as well as all the solubilization and other benefits that some of those organisms have. So pretty simple, depending on crop type and whatnot. One of those, pour it into the auger as you're outloading a silo into your truck to take it out to the paddock, and off you go. So a pretty simple thing for people to consider, with powerful ability to not only increase crop performance, but give a really good start for any sort of soil health carbon building potential. So in conjunction with those seed treatments and thinking about soil biology and soil carbon building, and Toby with his comments about eligible activities. So Biomax humate prills, so many benefits, and if we look to just purely about fertilizer utilization, we can make the fertilizer that we're applying more efficient, and reduce lockup, reduce volatilization, and reduce biological antagonisms. So as I said earlier, humic acid, a derivative of humus in the soil, has some really unique properties. So unlike the soil having all negatively charged ions on the clay platelets, humic acid and fulvic acid have both negative and positive charges, and a lot of them, so are able to hold on to the soil, hold on to minerals at the same time, both anions and cations, therefore reducing leaching, but also holding them in a way that they're still plant available. So keeping them from locking up with other minerals, and also buffering any sort of toxic effect of acidity as such from the soil biology. LawrieCo, I've worked long and hard over a long period. I've been here now for 10 years, and back when I started, some of these products caused usability issues, and they were dusty and things were a little tough. There was great results, and so people wanted to keep using them, but it wasn't as easy as it is now. So we've been able to, through years of trial and error and R&D, been able to produce what we now think is the best humate prill in the country. So it's got an organic resin coating on it, which stops the dust, increases the structural integrity of the granule. So it just makes it highly usable, and through a wide range of machinery, but absolutely no problems putting this type of product through your air seeder, for example, now. So a pretty simple additive, at sort of like 5 to 10% of your fertilizer rate. High can go higher if you've got sodic soil or other problems, but as far as the benefits of making what you're doing more efficient, getting more utilization out of your fertilizer, and reducing antagonisms within the soil system, a fantastic option to consider. So, so far we've been talking about complementing and enhancing existing products or synthetic products. There are a number of options, and this isn't all of them, but we just thought we'd just focus on 3 quick ones. to give people a little bit of an idea of other options other than your typical single super, MAP, DAP, those types of products when we're looking at these. So all of these apply as an eligible activity as well if you're getting into a carbon project, even if it's not entirely a swap out for MAP or DAP or whatever else, if you're putting a percentage of this in, which a lot of people do. But there are alternatives. So if we look at biograys on the left, so this is more for anyone that's in the audience that's grazing. So it's a custom blendable, so it can be customized to suit your soil tests and whatnot. But it's basically a phosphorus fertilizer with biostimulants, other macronutrients, calcium, potassium added in if need be, biology, biostimulants, and trace elements. Designed to substitute where people would be just putting out single super. So to have a direct substitute for single super, that gives you all those other benefits as far as trace elements, biostimulants, rapid release soluble phosphorus, as well as sustained release phosphorus at a similar dollar value per hectare. So biostimulative, awesome for trying to get back that balance in microbes in your soil to start that carbon building process and that general overall plant animal health benefits that product offers. So loose product needs to go through a belt spreader. Biocomplete, a really good option if you're looking to maybe swap out MAP in a cropping program. So a phosphorus, nitrogen, sulfur, calcium, silica, and trace element fertilizer with humic acid, all in the one compound granule. So we're talking about phosphorus forms here that aren't soluble, that aren't acidic, that release with biological interaction, and having those biostimulants of the sulfur, the nitrogen, and the humic acid with it dramatically increases the release of the phosphorus. But you can be pretty certain that all of that phosphorus is going to get into the plant rather than locking up, which a large percentage of a lot of these acidic fertilizers do. And then guano, another one, probably more specific to swapping out single super. So pretty much just a calcium phosphorus fertilizer or a phosphorus calcium fertilizer, still with those other benefits of silica and trace elements. But again, it's a sustained release phosphorus fertilizer that doesn't have the tendencies to lock up like acid fertilizers. And they're all biostimulative as well, the biocomplete and the guano. So again, bringing back that biological balance rather than suppressing it like acid fertilizers do. So very quickly now, so buffering, we spoke about that earlier, trying to reduce that toxic effect that some of these agrochemicals mainly have on the system, but also acid fertilizers. So a little bit like humic acid, fulvic acid is an extract of humus, so a natural product, having an amazingly high amount of electrical charges, both negative and positive, so it can do things that really nothing else other than that humus fraction, the humic and fulvic acids, can do. And again, coming back to that analogy of the carbon filters in the tractor or your spray mask, fulvic acid has the ability to bind up toxins in the soil. So I think that a lot of people out there are struggling whether they notice or not. Chemical residue buildup in the soil is becoming a massive problem, particularly in impervious layers as you go down through the profile. So it has the ability to be able to do that, but it also has the ability to increase the efficiency of systemic and interlaminar products by actually dragging those things into the plant. So that can be used with foliar fertilizers. It can be used with systemic and interlaminar fungicides, insecticides, and also herbicides. So a tool that you can use to, one, decrease rates of those toxic inputs into your system, and then also to bind up any off-target spray that might hit the soil and enter that soil system. So fulvic acid concentrate, easy to use, become a lot of problems with that product. So, you know, some people that may have used some of these things historically, the powders and whatnot, were more difficult and not as user friendly. So we've tried really hard to get products that you guys as farmers can integrate into your system without the hassles that people may have previously had. Biomax Enhance. So this is the liquid fertilizer coating. So all the properties of fulvic acid as far as chelation, buffering, and whatnot. So it's predominantly a concentrated fulvic acid in a liquid, same as the F75, but it also has humic acid, kelp, and some drying agents and whatnot to help it adhere and be more user friendly when applied to fertilizer. So applicable to your DAPs and your MAPs, urea, single super, ammonium sulfate, all those synthetic fertilizers. So 3 to 5 litres per hectare, and all those benefits we've spoken about reducing. So I think if we look back to the beginning of the presentation where we were talking about acidification of agricultural soils, and we look back to that WellPup research station slide where we had the sort of the imbalance in fungal to bacteria ratios. A lot of these problems can be blamed on soil applied urea. So one thing, like that previous slide where we're talking about putting the Enhance on it, or even humate prills, we can buffer that, and we can reduce that toxic effect and part reduce the acidification. But we've seen, and as a lot of people have seen, amazing results with using nitrogen as a foliar applied nutrient. So I guess, and the next slide we go into a bit more, but dissolving urea, you know, not quite as good an option, but using UAN, you know, there's a number of different nitrogen options. We sell a product called NCARB as well. But dissolving that nitrogen and foliar applying it pretty much has the opposite effect on the soil system to what soil applied nitrogen does. So soil applied nitrogen, we know it's acidifying. And we know that it hyperstimulates the bacterial component, and we get that imbalance, and pretty much then we oxidize carbon out of the system. So foliar applied nitrogen, the opposite to that. It doesn't antagonize the soil system. It doesn't antagonize the soil biology. And if it's a nitrogen deficient crop, it increases photosynthesis and increases that carbon pump of those root exudates into the soil, and we actually build carbon. So same product, different management technique, completely different result. And so just staying on, we're sort of running low on time, but just staying on the foliar nutrition, the benefits over broadcasting urea that you also get when you start to foliar apply nitrogen is that quite often it's all compatible with other sprays that you might be putting out. So that might be a broadleaf herbicide spray, it might be a fungicide. So becomes, instead of multiple passes, it can become a single pass. And it also gives you the ability to then top up with other minerals and biostimulants like what we're looking at here on the screen. So anyone who's been around in this game for a while has probably heard of someone called Gary Zimmer, and he speaks about the synergy between calcium, phosphorus, and boron. As to a lot of other people, those calcium and phosphorus usually can't go together. We've got a product called Phoscal Ultra, which combines calcium, phosphorus, silica, boron. It's got a little bit of magnesium, potassium, pretty much got the full spectrum of trace elements in very small amounts. Means that you can start to apply some of these other catalysts to get optimum photosynthesis and plant function, as well as fruitfulness and flowering, resulting in yield. Increased sugars, helping with frost, like a whole lot of benefits that you get over broadcasting urea when you start to look at putting some of these things with some dissolved nitrogen or dissolved urea, or some of those other commercially purchased products. Again, boost fish and kelp and fulvic and some plant growth stimulants to then complement the uptake of the Phoscal and to stimulate the plants to perform to their optimum. And then I guess there's a lot of people out there that are already using zinc or copper or manganese or a combination of them, boron, whatnot. So the ability to then be able to stick that into the same spray and further complement it, just a really a small change, but massive results. So this is my last slide, and then we're on to Harry. So sorry for leaving you short, Harry. But so stubble digestion, as we were saying earlier in the piece about ways or alternatives to burning residue to get through. So we've got a lot of customers that grow 7 tons, 8 tons of wheat and have large residues and get away with digesting that crop residue. So we have a product called Biomax Digest and Biomax Digest Kicker. So Biomax Digest is a fungal inoculant, basically, and Digest Kicker is a food source for that. So you put the two of them in the tank, apply them to your crop residue post harvest. And then that fungi then digests the cellulose in the woody material and make it very brittle, so that you can get through with conventional tines, discs, whatever it is that you're using. But the big benefits of that are that you then sequester that carbon or much larger amount of that carbon back into the soil. And it's also much more efficient at digestion than what bacterial digestion, which is sort of commonly what's going on. So fungal digestion uses a lot less nitrogen in that process, so that the nitrogen drawdown is greatly reduced. So you can get through your residues. You have a much higher retention of nitrogen in the system. And the both soil structure and carbon building properties of that product are fairly amazing. So you can see there, untreated and treated, that's in the subsequent crop. All right, I'll finish up there, Harry. So thank you.
Thanks for that, Rod. Noting that it is 1 o'clock, so Toby, feel free to interrupt me at when you need to.
No, you take your time, guys. That's all right. I think this is fine. If you need another 5 or 10 minutes or however long, Harry, you carry on. Yeah, people, if you have to dash, appreciate it. The recording's available, but the guys are here and they'll keep moving through. So yeah, stay tuned if you can.
Thank you, and thanks for that, Rod. That's fantastic overview of the bit of the LawrieCo system, and certainly what Luke has done and others to maximise our carbon building. I just thought I'd take a few different testing options today. Obviously, one of the benefits that we have this year knowing that it is a dry season, is the ability to tissue test and to capture that plant tissue in the season and then get an accurate printout of what nutrient levels are in that tissue at that specific point in time. So really on this season is where the tissue testing will come into its own. And what we're typically having conversations with people about right now is, what do I budget at the sowing point in time? Am I reducing that rate? How is that going to work throughout the season? So typically what we would advise, especially for a year like we've had with this last dry season, is you don't want to shortcut yourself with your fertilizer application for this next year's sowing. And so what you've got the flexibility to do is maintain or continue your upfront fertilizer application at a sort of standard level. Of course, buffer with your LawrieCo Humate Prills to get that carbon source ticking over and stimulating the biology. But then what you can do is you can modify your in-season nutrition application, and specifically by taking these tissue tests, you can really drill down on what nutrients are lacking and at what point in time, so that instead of just doing a blanket trace element spray or a blanket nitrogen spray or urea application, you can modify your program according to what the plant needs in a given point in time. So at around about $80 a test, it's a very cost-efficient way to say, actually, am I deficient in some of these trace elements, or how deficient am I, so that you can modify your rate? How deficient am I in nitrogen, or is my plant ticking over fine with the current nitrogen levels? And crucially, what it then gives us the ability to do is to make some decisions not only on what nutrients you put into the program, but how much biostimulant effect that you can bring through. So obviously, Rod was talking to some of our liquid foliar application products, one of them being Boost, is you can make a decision on the incorporation of some of those biostimulant products as well, which are crucial for enhancing that liquid carbon pathway for not only the carbon building, but things like preventing or increasing resilience to frost and disease and those sort of stress risks. So a fantastic option, obviously not for now in the season, but for when we're in that foliar application window. To touch on microbe testing, this is one that has increased rapidly in adoption over the last few years. Certainly, we're doing hundreds of tests now of microbial samples. And it's a fantastic way to get an understanding not only of the soil profile. People are getting, again, increasingly familiar with a soil test to get an understanding of what nutrients are available and the soil mineral balance. But we can now do accurate and efficient tests the exact same way that you would do a soil test, by looking at the microbes. And so what I've pulled out here is a recent microbe sample that I took here in South Australia about a month ago. And it showcases what we're seeing pretty commonly for a conventional broadacre cropping environment. This is very characteristic of what you'd see somebody doing or a microbe test displaying when they're a completely conventional cropper. So I'll just run you through sort of a few of the key highlights that we're seeing. Now, number one would be that the total microorganisms and the microbial diversity is far below the ideal limit. So you can see on the top left-hand side of that test there, we've got total microorganisms at 16.4 milligrams per kilogram, and the guide would be about 50. And likewise, just below that, you've got microbial diversity at 16.5 out of 80. And so this is sort of a measure of how prolific are the microbes in the environment and how diverse are they. And just like a society of people, if everybody had the same job, it would be pretty boring and we wouldn't get too far. Same situation with the microbe diversity. You want as much as possible and as high diversity as possible, so you can tick as many of the functions within the soil profile and plant cycle as possible. It's crucial to note here that Rod was talking at the beginning about that bacteria to fungi ratio, and you'll see on this chart that it says 3.2, which would actually give a false reading in this case, as you might think, fantastic, my fungi to bacteria ratio is where I want it to be. But what this side of the test actually picks up is both the fungal, the beneficial fungi, and also the pathogens and those antagonistic ones in the same portion. So don't be misled that this fungi to bacteria ratio, in this instance, it's picking up the full portion of fungi in that soil profile. So when you're starting out on the microbe pathway, and especially when you've got a low pool of total microorganisms and a low microbial diversity, we don't refer to the fungi to bacteria ratio as much as when you've got those pools built up in the soil profile and thriving. And then when we've got the pathogenic load lower and when we've increased the beneficials, that's when it really comes more into play, when you can look at that fungi to bacteria ratio. On the right-hand side there's some critically low values, which are the prime drivers not only of carbon sequestration, of course, but also general plant performance and of course, yield and health. One of them would be the mycorrhizal fungi, absolutely crucial for carbon fixation and that nutrient cycling in the soil profile. It's about 20% of the rate as to where we'd want it to be for proper functioning. The protozoa, they're crucial. They're crucially affected by agrochemicals, a key for soil cycling and nutrient cycling in the profile. And now we're at 0 in this instance. That's the lowest that I'd seen, but it's pretty characteristic of what you would see for a conventional cropper. Mostly affected by those herbicides. So a strategy could be just to include some of that F75 fulvic acid just to start buffering that toxic effect there. And then the only other one I'll highlight before moving on is that gram-negative bacteria at just under 2 when it should be about 11. And they're responsible for things like nitrogen fixation, phosphorus solubilization in the soil profile, and also the production of plant growth promoting hormones naturally in the soil profile that again stimulate that plant growth and function. So again, you can see a quite significant degradation of that microbe population in the soil profile from a conventional cropping point of view. Moving on just to some training aspects. There's no expectation that you're going to remember everything from today, and certainly there's an ongoing process. We like to have the statement of a crawl, walk, run approach within our business, which means you might not give everything a go or understand everything right from the beginning, but just to build upon some of those steps and learning. So we've got a textbook which I've got here in front of me, which is now available. So a fantastic resource that was put together by the team with around about 20 years worth of our knowledge and research and development. And that also works in nicely with our online training that we've got, which is a 9-module self-paced system. And together they're just $99 plus some postage wherever we're sending the hard copy to you too. And it's a great way just to start the soil carbon regeneration journey or the soil microbial health journey, just to get an understanding of how you best adopt these practices on farm. So thanks so much for listening today, guys. I hope it's been beneficial just to pull things together in some first steps that you might choose to take for your farming operation this season. The number one thing that we would suggest, and we've seen based on our track record over the last 2 decades of doing this, is that it starts with getting things right at sowing. And so we've got the option and ability now to, as Rod has pulled apart, our first recommendation would be to have that shore crop seed treatment going out on all seed that is being sown this season, and then also to buffer the starting fertilizer requirements, whether it's MAP, DAP, single super, whatever it is for your operation, at around about 5 to 10% of that starting fertilizer rate with the LawrieCo Humate Prills. Now, just as a bit of indicative cost, or in terms of a shore crop seed treatment, we'll pick a wheat application, for example, sown at 100 kilograms. You're looking at about $10 a hectare for a sort of application there with that short crop seed treatment. And then likewise, for if you assumed a 10 kilogram hectare application rate of the Humate Prills, you're looking at about $20 a hectare. So, of course, that cumulatively would be around $30 a hectare mark, but noting that you are reducing some of the starting fertilizer rate by the similar percent that you're applying the Humate Prills there. So an option for sowing. Option number 2, or certainly strategy number 2, would be the inclusion of our F75 fulvic acid with the AgChem program. Can also be included with any foliar passes of fertilizers, namely dissolved urea or liquid nitrogen. And that 100 mils a hectare is really all that you require per pass, and that's just under $1 a hectare. So a very simple and cost-effective way to get that whole biological system ticking over. And then we've also, suggestion number 3 would be to coat the in-crop urea with Biomax Enhance, which is our LawrieCo fertilizer coating. And again, being that fulvic-based fertilizer coating, you're going to help to keep the nutrients where it is in the soil profile, and then to increase its efficiency and longevity. So just a few things, and roughly that works out about $5 to $8 a hectare with your on top of your urea application. Noting that that you could potentially reduce some of that urea rate as well. So please do reach out to us. We've got Rodney, who's in Victoria and New South Wales, and then we've got John Painter and Sam Peters, who are part of the SA team, and then myself, obviously getting across a couple of different states. So I'll pass back to you now, Toby, but thanks for your time, and hopefully we can implement some of these strategies for a fantastic season.
Great. Thanks, Harry and Rod. There isn't a whole lot more from me. I'm going to go straight to my questions here. I did have a question from Karen come in just around in-person events. Harry, I don't know if you want to comment on that. I know you guys do have quite a few of those. Oops, you lost my screen, I think. You guys can still see that? Yep.
Yes, yep.
Cool. Yeah, you guys do have events. I said keep an eye out on our newsletter for that, and we're also looking to do a follow-up later in the year, sort of mid-cycle, to maybe get into some of that testing. Anything you want to add, Harry?
No, absolutely. We attend most of the major field days. Obviously, there's the Southeast Field Day coming up this end of this week, which we'll be at. But yeah, we're looking to put together a run not only of carbon presentations, but of crop walks throughout the season, just to get into regional communities to unpack what's going on locally as well.
Good one. Also, we had another question from Barbara just around if you guys had, I know there's plenty of collateral that you have on the products. Do you have any published scientific or experiments that can be shared perhaps with the group as well?
Absolutely. We're working right now on a document that synthesizes essentially the last 25 years worth of trials and technical regarding the carbon side of things. Also, yeah, we've got plenty of background developments and collateral on individual products and how they might be suited to situations. And of course, there's the Soils Alive textbook, which summarizes some of those details as well.
Oh, good. Very good. I encourage anyone, if you've got any questions, pop them in the Q&A, or like Harry said, do reach out to any of us. Look, I mean, what I heard there today was great to hear from Rod. Look, I don't need to change up my machinery. I can do most of this. The science was complex. I took that away, but the application was pretty straightforward. We are just moving to some simple applications. So once you cut through the science, have a chat with your agro or the guys here, the actual application is pretty easy. We can use our existing machinery. We're just going to try and complement that biological balance a bit more. And I think sort of, Harry, I really appreciate, we will loop back to this, is the little bit of knowledge is power, knowing what we're dealing with, understanding what's in the soil, what's not in the soil, so that we can be efficient. And as Rod and I touched on, the more efficient you can be with your applications, the better you're going to have your outcomes from an emissions perspective in your ACCU generation. But also we're not antagonizing, and I love that phrase, antagonizing that soil microfauna, the microbiology. We aren't getting those lockups that Rodney touched on as well. So I think, look, lots of great takeaways there. It is a technical topic, but there are those resources available to everyone. So do encourage you all, do a bit more homework. As always, I always say that, do your homework, get in touch with us. There's the training stuff that Harry talked about as well, or the LawrieCo website if you want to have a chat to the guys. Thank you for staying on a little bit longer. Certainly worthwhile. I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you all next month. Thanks very much. Bye for now.